Something was pulled from the ocean floor in 1901 that shouldn't exist. A lump of encrusted bronze pulled from a 2,000-year-old shipwreck. Inside, interlocking gears of extraordinary precision, dozens of them meshing together in a device nobody in 1901 could explain. Nobody in 2025 fully can either. This is not a story about aliens or conspiracy. It's a story about what human ingenuity achieved and then quietly forgot, and about the gaps in our knowledge that modern science is still trying to close. Roman civilization built things that stood for 2,000 years. Some of what they knew, we are still catching up to. 2,000 years ago, Rome was the largest city on Earth. Over 1 million people lived within its walls at its peak. Fresh water flowed into the city through 11 major aqueducts. Roughly 300 million gallons delivered every single day. Roads connected every corner of an empire spanning 3 continents. More than 250,000 miles of paved highway, built without modern machinery. The Pantheon in Rome still holds the record as the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome. It was completed in roughly 125 CE. No steel rebar, no power tools. This was a civilization that, by almost any measure, should not have been able to do what it did, and yet the evidence stands in stone and bronze across 3 continents. The question isn't whether they built it. The question is how and why we lost track. In 1900, a sponge diver off the Greek island of Antikythera ran out of air. Surfacing too fast, he had to stop, and in doing so, noticed something on the bottom. A wreck, ancient, covered in statues and cargo. Among the recovered objects was a lump of corroded bronze about the size of a shoebox. For decades, researchers weren't sure what it was. Then in the 1950s, historian Derek de Solla Price took a closer look. What he found inside were at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, precisely cut, deliberately arranged, part of a working mechanical system. The device dates to around 100 BCE. That is more than 1,000 years before mechanical clocks appear in Europe. According to research published in Nature, it modeled the motions of the sun and moon. It predicted eclipses decades in advance, using nothing but bronze gears and mathematics. Smithsonian Magazine describes it as an ancient analog computer. The precision of its gear ratios encodes knowledge of the Saros cycle, an 18-year eclipse pattern. This wasn't a curiosity. It was functional, calibrated science in mechanical form. And as far as current evidence shows, nothing like it appears again for over a millennium. The Antikythera mechanism is the most dramatic example, but it's far from the only one. Take Roman concrete. Modern concrete crumbles in seawater within decades. Roman harbor structures have survived underwater for 2,000 years. According to Britannica, Roman concrete, opus cementitium, used volcanic ash from the region near Pozzuoli. When mixed with lime and seawater, this ash triggered a chemical reaction, one that produced interlocking crystals inside the concrete itself. The result was a material that actually grew stronger with time in saltwater exposure. Modern materials scientists only decoded this mechanism in recent decades. Now consider Roman roads. The Journal of Roman Archaeology documents layered construction using gravel, sand, and fitted stone. Some of these roads are still in use in Europe today. Then there are Roman surgical instruments. Dozens have been recovered from archaeological sites across the empire. They include scalpels, bone drills, and forceps nearly identical to instruments used in surgery today. Roman physicians Galen and Dioscorides also left behind pharmacological texts, documenting hundreds of plant-based medicines, some of which modern pharmacology has since confirmed as active. The specific preparation methods for some of these compounds, however, remain incompletely understood. Ancient texts sometimes use figurative or coded language that doesn't translate cleanly into modern chemistry. Watermills represent another puzzle. Archaeological evidence confirms Romans used them to grind grain. The Barbegal Mill complex in France had 16 water wheels operating simultaneously, enough to feed a city of 80,000 people. But how widespread these mills were remains debated. At this point, it's worth pausing to state what mainstream historians actually say, because the framing of Roman technology as mysteriously lost can obscure a more complex reality. Most historians argue these technologies didn't vanish in a sudden catastrophe. They faded gradually as the economic and political conditions that sustained them shifted. Roman concrete, for instance, required specific volcanic ash from Pozzuoli. As trade networks contracted in late antiquity, access to that specific material became harder to maintain. The knowledge wasn't erased, the supply chain was disrupted. Similarly, the Antikythera mechanism may not represent a widely shared technology. Some scholars argue it may have been a singular or rare achievement, not evidence of mass production or common mechanical knowledge, but perhaps one workshop's exceptional work. The Archaeology magazine source notes that aspects of the device's construction remain uncertain even now. And watermill adoption, according to the Journal of Archaeological Science, was likely more regional than empire-wide. These are not lost secrets. They are incomplete records in an ongoing investigation. But here is where the story takes a turn that even skeptical historians find remarkable. When modern materials scientists finally decoded Roman concrete in the 2010s, they weren't just impressed. They were surprised. The concrete wasn't just durable despite seawater. It was designed to interact with it, a process that no modern concrete formula replicates. Researchers publishing in peer-reviewed journals noted that the Roman formula was not an accident. It required specific knowledge of which volcanic ash to use and in what proportions. That knowledge was accumulated over centuries of empirical practice, and then it was not passed forward in a form that survived. The same is true of the Antikythera mechanism. Computational tomography scans in the 2000s revealed gear inscriptions that hadn't been seen in 2,000 years. Text describing planetary motion. Further evidence the device was designed for systematic astronomical use. No follow-on device. No school of successors. The mechanical tradition appears to have simply ended. What we are left with is not a mystery of supernatural origin. It's a mystery of transmission. How knowledge travels and what conditions allow it to survive. Some historians argue that the real lesson of Roman technology isn't about genius or mystery, it's about infrastructure, the systems that allow knowledge to accumulate and be shared. Rome sustained its engineering achievements because it had schools, trade networks, and written records. When those systems contracted, knowledge contracted with them. Experimental archaeology is now trying to recover what written records didn't preserve. Researchers at the Berkeley Lab, working with the Ramacons project, have sampled ancient Roman harbor concrete, testing it for chemistry that can inform new sustainable building materials. Some historians argue the Antikythera mechanism suggests Greek and Roman engineers were experimenting with mechanical computation, a tradition that, for reasons still not fully understood, didn't develop further in antiquity. That is a genuinely open question in the historical record. Not a conspiracy, not a cover-up, simply a gap in survival, in transmission, in luck. What we've rediscovered through archaeology tells us something important about human ingenuity. It doesn't require ideal conditions, but it does require continuity. What piece of ancient engineering surprises you most? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe to Time Excavated. We dig so you don't have to.